The breath beneath the snow, the world had forgotten color. White pressed against white, howling its ancient song through valleys that remembered warmth only as myth. The wind carved sculptures from snowdrifts, each gust a blade that cut through Kael's worn cloak and found the hollow spaces between her ribs where hunger lived. She should have turned back hours ago. The cabin waited 3 miles behind her, its fading embers the only promise of survival in this frozen wasteland. But something pulled her forward. Not logic, not hope, but the strange compass that lived in her chest, the one that always pointed toward ruin. Her fingers had stopped hurting an hour ago. That was when she knew death had extended its invitation. The sound came between heartbeats, a whisper of breath too small to belong to this merciless landscape. Kael stopped, ice crystals forming on her lashes as she tilted her head. There, beneath the wind's howl, beneath her own labored breathing, a rhythm, shallow, desperate, failing. She dropped to her knees, and the cold bit through her threadbare trousers like teeth. Her hands, clumsy with frost, clawed at the snow. The white gave way to more white, endless and indifferent, until her knuckles scraped something that wasn't ice. Fur, matted, frozen. The cub was barely larger than her forearm, its small body locked in the rigor of near death. Silver-white fur clung to bones too prominent, too fragile. But the chest moved, barely, a flutter like a moth's wing against glass. "No!" Kael breathed, though her voice carried no authority here. Death was the only sovereign in this place. She tore open her cloak, pressing the cub against the warmth of her body. The cold transferred instantly, stealing what little heat she'd managed to preserve. Her muscles screamed in protest as she stood, the weight of the small creature somehow heavier than stone. The journey back was memory more than consciousness. Her legs moved without her permission, following the ghost trail of her own footprints before the wind could erase them entirely. The cub's heartbeat pressed against her ribs, unsteady, arrhythmic, but persistent. She matched her breathing to its rhythm, willing her warmth into its dying body. When she stumbled through the cabin door, her vision had narrowed to a pinpoint of grey. The fire had died to ash. Her hands refused to obey as she tried to gather kindling. The cub lay on the floor, its silver fur stark against the dark wood, its eyes closed. Kael had never prayed. Prayer required the belief that something listened. But as she finally coaxed flame from wood and held the cub close to the weak fire, she found words leaving her cracked lips anyway. "Please," she whispered to whatever gods might exist in this forsaken place. "Not this one. Take anything else. Take me. But not this small thing that hasn't lived yet." The cub's eyes opened, just a fraction. They were blue, impossibly blue, like summer sky that this frozen land had forgotten. They found hers, and something passed between them. Recognition. Promise. A thread pulled taut across the space where their gazes met. Then those blue eyes closed again, and Kael worked through the night with hands that shook not from cold, but from something fiercer. She melted snow in her mouth and let drops fall between the cub's lips. She wrapped it in every spare cloth she owned. She kept the fire burning even as her own reserves guttered like a dying candle. Dawn never came. In winter this far north, darkness was absolute. But the wind changed, and in that change, Kael heard something that made her blood crystallize. Footsteps, many of them, heavy, purposeful. She moved without thinking, placing her body between the door and the cub. Her only weapon was a rusted knife, its blade barely longer than her palm. But she held it steady as shadows darkened the frosted window. The door exploded inward, and warriors filled her small cabin like a storm given form. They wore furs and leather, their faces hard as the mountains, weapons drawn and gleaming with purpose. But they stopped. Every one of them, frozen as statuary. They weren't looking at her. They were looking past her, at the small silver form curled by her dying fire. The largest warrior dropped to one knee so hard the floorboards cracked. Then another, until every fierce figure bowed their head, weapons lowered, surrender written in every line of their enormous frames. "The prince!" one breathed, voice cracking on the words. "You saved the prince!" And then the shadows themselves seemed to part as a figure stepped through the doorway. He was tall enough to make the warriors look small, broad enough to eclipse the grey light from outside. Furs draped his shoulders like a mantle of storms, and silver threaded through his dark hair like frost through midnight. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Blue, the same impossible blue as the cub's. He looked at the small form by the fire, then at her. Then he did something that made the world tilt on its axis. The king, because she knew somehow that's what he was, dropped to his knees before her, his proud head bowed. And when he lifted his gaze, those summer sky eyes held something ancient and absolute. "Mate," he said, and the word carried the weight of prophecy. "My queen, you've brought my son back from death's threshold, and in doing so, you've completed what was written in stars before either of us drew breath." Esh! Kael's knife clattered to the floor as the thread she'd felt in the cub's gaze pulled taut, stretching across the space between her and this impossible king, binding them with a force that made gravity seem gentle. The bond that burns. The cabin walls pressed inward as the king rose to his full height, and Kael discovered that terror and something dangerously close to recognition could occupy the same breath. The warriors remained kneeling, their massive forms creating shadows that danced with the firelight, but their eyes tracked every movement with predatory precision. "I don't understand," Kael managed, her voice smaller than she'd intended. The words came out fractured, edges sharp with confusion and the exhaustion that had settled into her bones during the endless night. The king moved past her with a grace that belied his size, dropping beside the cub with a gentleness that seemed impossible in hands so scarred. He touched the small silver head, and the cub stirred, releasing a sound between a whimper and a purr. The king's shoulders, broad enough to carry mountains, shook with something that might have been relief or grief, or both. "My son," he said, voice rough as stone grinding stone. "Rowan." He wandered during the moon madness, when the change takes our young unpredictably. "We've searched 3 days." He turned those devastating blue eyes back to her. "You found him when I could not. You gave your warmth when you had little to spare. You offered your life for his." "I didn't know," Kael started, but he cut her off with a gesture. "You didn't need to know. That's what makes it sacred." He stood, and the space between them hummed with electricity that made her skin prickle. "I am Fenris, High King of the Silver Court, Alpha of the Northern Packs, and you carry my scent now. Can you feel it? The pull?" She wanted to deny it, wanted to name it shock, exhaustion, hunger, but the thread between them vibrated like a plucked string, and her body responded before her mind could craft lies. Her pulse jumped. Her skin flushed despite the cold. Something deep in her chest resonated with his presence like a tuning fork finding its match. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I'm nobody, an exile. I have nothing." "You have everything," Fenris interrupted, and he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his stubble, the tiny scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the weight of centuries in eyes too young to hold them. "The bond doesn't choose based on gold or title. It chooses based on truth. And your truth, Kael of the Northern Wastes, is written in the very act that brought you into my son's path." "How do you know my name?" The question emerged sharper than intended, defensive. "I know many things about you now. The bond shares memories like breath." His voice dropped lower, intimate, despite the warriors surrounding them. "I know you've been alone for 8 winters. I know you chose exile over execution when they called you witch. I know you dream in languages you've never learned, and the forest speaks to you in ways it speaks to no human." Kael's breath caught. Those were secrets she'd buried deeper than graves. "Stay out of my head. I would if I could," and there was genuine regret in his tone. "But the bond has its own will. It's already begun weaving us together. Fighting it only makes it tighter. One of the warriors, a woman with braids thick as rope and a scar tracing her jaw, cleared her throat. "Sire, the prince needs proper healing, and the weather worsens. We should return before the second storm hits." Fenris nodded but didn't move, his attention fixed on Kael with an intensity that made her want to simultaneously step closer and bolt through the door into the killing snow. "Come with us," he said. It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't quite a request either. "Let me honor what you've done. Let me—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his weathered features. "Let me know you. The bond demands it, yes, but I would choose it regardless. I don't belong in courts," Kael said, even as part of her, the part that had been howling in loneliness for 8 endless winters, yearned toward his words like a flower toward sun. "No," Fenris agreed, surprising her. "You belong in forests and storm, in places where magic runs wild and rules bend. But my court is not what you imagine. We are wolves wearing crowns, and our palace is built of stone and wildness in equal measure." The cub, Rowan, made a sound, and Fenris returned to him immediately, gathering the small body with infinite care. The boy began to shift, fur receding like tide, small human limbs emerging pale and shaking. He couldn't have been more than 5 winters old, dark hair matted with sweat and ice, those impossible blue eyes cracking open. "Papa," his voice was barely audible. "I'm here, little storm. You're safe." Fenris pressed his forehead to his son's, and the gesture was so tender that Kael felt something crack in her chest. "You scared me. Never do that again." "I saw a white rabbit," Rowan mumbled. "Wanted to show you. Got lost. So cold, Papa. Then she came. The warm lady. She sang." Fenris's gaze snapped to Kael. "You sang to him?" She didn't remember singing, but sometimes her voice emerged without permission, carrying melodies that tasted of places she'd never been. "Maybe. I don't remember." "She sang the old words," Rowan continued, his small hand reaching toward Kael, even from his father's arms. "The ones grandmother used to sing before the dark came." The warriors exchanged glances, something like awe and fear mixing in their expressions. The scarred woman spoke again. "Sire, if she carries the old songs, I know what it means, Thora." Fenris's voice carried warning and wonder both. His eyes found Kael's once more, and this time she saw the question there, the desperate hope of something too large to name. The prophecy spoke of a voice that remembers what we've forgotten, a voice that could bridge what was broken. "I don't know any prophecies," Kael said, but her words felt hollow even to her own ears. Because deep down, in the place where instinct lived, she'd always known she was waiting for something. Someone. This. "Then let us teach you," Fenris said softly. "Let us show you who you've always been." Outside, the wind howled its agreement or its warning. Kael couldn't tell which. The journey to Silver Stone. They wrapped Rowan in furs thick enough to survive the apocalypse, and Thora carried him with a tenderness that contradicted her warrior's build. The cabin that had been Kael's entire world for 8 winters suddenly felt smaller, meaner, a place that had never been home so much as a hiding place from a life she'd fled. She gathered what little she owned, a few clothes, the rusted knife, a wooden figurine of a wolf she'd carved during endless winter nights. Fenris watched her pack with those ancient blue eyes, reading volumes in every gesture. When she reached for her mother's silver comb, the only thing she'd kept from her past life, his expression softened. "My mother had one like that," he said quietly, "before the darkness took her." Kael's fingers tightened around the comb. She wanted to ask what darkness, what loss, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she tucked it carefully into her pack and turned to face him. "I'm not who you think I am," she said, needing him to understand before they crossed this threshold. "I'm not special, not prophesied, just someone who couldn't let something small and helpless die." Fenris stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, warmth that seemed impossible in this frozen wasteland. Do you know what makes someone worthy of the bond? It's not power or prophecy. It's exactly that. The inability to walk past suffering. The instinct to give when you have nothing left to give. You think that's common? It's the rarest thing in any world. Before she could respond, he touched her hand. Just a brush of scarred fingers against her frost-damaged knuckles, and the thread between them sang so loudly she gasped. Images flooded her mind. A castle built into a mountainside, silver waterfalls frozen mid-cascade, wolves running through forests where moonlight pooled like liquid mercury, and beneath it all, a loneliness that echoed her own, a king who ruled thousands but knew none of them, who'd lost his mate to darkness and raised his son in the shadow of that loss. She pulled back, breath coming sharp. What was that? The bond showing you truth, Fenris said, and there was apology in his tone. It will do that. Show you things, feelings, memories. It's invasive and sacred in equal measure, and I'm sorry if it frightened you. It didn't frighten me. And that was the terrifying part. It had felt like coming home. The journey should have killed them. The storm Thora had warned about hit with a fury that spoke of divine rage, wind turning snow into weapons that slashed at exposed skin. But the warriors moved with supernatural surety, and Fenris stayed close to Kael, his massive frame blocking the worst of the wind's assault. At some point, she stopped feeling her feet. Then her hands. The cold became abstract, a concept rather than sensation. Fenris noticed, of course he noticed, and without asking permission, he pulled her against his side, sharing warmth that seemed to flow from some inexhaustible source. "We're almost there," he murmured against her ear, and even through the storm's howl she heard him clearly. "Can you see it? Through the white?" She squinted, and there, emerging from the blizzard like a fever dream, silver stone caught what little light existed. The palace wasn't built, it had been carved from the mountain itself, spires and towers flowing from rock as if the stone had grown rather than been shaped. Windows glowed with firelight, warm and impossible against the killing cold. "Silver Stone Keep," Fenris said, and there was pride in his voice but also melancholy. "Home to my pack for 3,000 years, witness to glories and horrors in equal measure, and now, if you'll have it, you're home as well." Guards met them at the massive gates, more warriors in fur and leather, their eyes reflecting light like animals. They bowed to Fenris, but their gazes lingered on Kael with open curiosity and something that might have been suspicion. She didn't blame them. She was a stranger dragged from the frozen wastes, claiming connection to their king through mystical bonds that made no rational sense. Inside, the warmth hit like a physical blow. Kael's frozen extremities began to scream as blood flow returned. Fenris caught her as her knees buckled, lifting her with an ease that would have been embarrassing if she'd had energy left for embarrassment. "Get her to the healing chambers," he ordered Thora, "and bring the healers for Rowan. I want both of them examined immediately." "I'm fine," Kael protested weakly, but her body betrayed the lie with violent shivering. "You're hypothermic," Fenris corrected, and there was no room for argument in his tone. "You gave my son your warmth and nearly died for it. Let me repay that by ensuring you live." The healing chambers were a maze of interconnected rooms, filled with steam and herbs that smelled of summer and memory. The healers were all women, some young, some ancient, with eyes that saw too much and hands that worked with practiced efficiency. They stripped Kael's frozen clothes, wrapped her in blankets warm from fires that never died, and fed her broth that tasted of things that had never grown in winter soil. Through it all, she felt Fenris's presence like a phantom limb. The bond pulsed with his concern, his relief as her temperature stabilized, his fierce protectiveness that felt simultaneously foreign and profoundly right. When the healers finally left her, declaring her foolish but alive, Kael found herself alone in a room larger than her entire cabin had been. A fire roared in a hearth carved with running wolves. Furs covered a bed that could have slept 5. Silver moonlight streamed through windows that faced the frozen mountains. She should have felt out of place, should have felt like an imposter wearing borrowed clothes in a borrowed room. But standing there, watching the snow fall beyond the glass, she felt the strangest sensation of puzzle pieces sliding into place. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Fenris filled the doorway, and for a moment, neither spoke. He'd shed his travelling furs, revealing simple clothes that somehow made him look more royal rather than less. His hair was damp, recently washed, and without the grime of travel, she could see the silver threading through the dark wasn't age, but something else. Magic, perhaps, or moonlight made tangible. "Rowan is stable," he said, "sleeping peacefully. The healers say he'll make a full recovery thanks to your quick action." He paused. "I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You owe me nothing," Kael said firmly. "I didn't save him for reward. I know, that's why the debt exists." He stepped into the room, and the door closed behind him with quiet finality. "Kael, I need you to understand something. The bond between us, it's real, sacred, but it doesn't obligate you to anything. You can choose to leave, to return to your cabin, or go anywhere else. I will honor that choice, even if it tears me apart." "But," she prompted, hearing the unspoken word, "but I hope you'll stay, not because of prophecy or debt or even the bond, though all of those matter. I hope you'll stay because—" He moved closer, close enough that she could count the scars on his hands, see the faint lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and loss. "Because I've been half alive for 5 years, and when you looked at me in that cabin, I remembered what it felt like to be whole." The honesty in his words struck her like a blade. "I don't know how to be a queen," she whispered. "Then don't be a queen. Be Kael. Be the woman who sings old songs and saves lost cubs and survives in impossible places. That's all I need. That's all any of us need." The song of remembering morning came wrapped in silver light that turned the mountains into broken glass sculptures. Kael woke in the massive bed, momentarily disoriented by warmth and softness after years of threadbare blankets and cold seeping through cabin walls. For a heartbeat, she thought it had been a dream. The cub, the king, the bond humming in her chest like a second heartbeat. Then the door burst open, and a small body launched onto the bed with the grace of a cannonball. "You're the warm lady," Rowan announced, his blue eyes wide with delight and wonder, his dark hair stuck up in every direction, and he wore a nightshirt 3 sizes too large. "Papa said I couldn't wake you, but I heard you moving, so it doesn't count as waking, does it?" Kael couldn't help but smile, something rusty and unused in her chest loosening slightly. "That's very specific logic." "I'm very specific," Rowan said seriously, then his face split into a grin that was pure sunlight. "You saved me. You sang the grandmother songs. Can you teach them to me? Papa knows some, but he says he forgets the words sometimes because grief makes memory foggy." The matter-of-fact way he spoke about grief gutted her. This child, barely 5 winters old, already understood loss in ways he shouldn't have to. "What happened to your mother?" The question emerged before she could stop it. Rowan's expression dimmed. "The shadow wolves took her 2 years ago. Papa says she was brave and strong and smelled like wildflowers. I don't remember her smell anymore." "Does that make me bad?" "No," Kael said fiercely, pulling the small boy into an embrace that surprised them both. "That makes you human. Memory isn't loyalty, little one. Love is." "You smell like snow and old magic," Rowan said against her shoulder. "It's nice, different from the other court ladies." Kael pulled back slightly. "There are other court ladies." "Lots," Rowan said, wrinkling his nose. "They wear pretty dresses and say pretty words, but they don't mean them." Their smiles stopped before they reached their eyes. "You should see them at dinner tonight. It's going to be funny." Before Kael could ask what he meant, Thora appeared in the doorway, her scarred face carefully neutral. "Prince Rowan, your father requests your presence for morning training, and you," she turned to Kael, "have been summoned to breakfast with the king." "Summoned?" The word tasted wrong in Kael's mouth. "Invited." Thora corrected, something like amusement flickering in her eyes. Fenris doesn't summon, he requests, sometimes desperately. The breakfast room was smaller than she'd expected, more intimate. A fire crackled in the hearth, and morning light streamed through windows that overlooked frozen waterfalls. Fenris stood when she entered, and the relief that crossed his features was so profound she felt it echo through the bond. "You came," he said, as if he'd doubted. "You requested," she replied, matching his tone. A smile tugged at his mouth, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "I wasn't sure you'd honor that. You don't seem the type to be ordered around." "I'm not," Kael confirmed, settling into the chair he pulled out for her. "Lucky for you, breakfast with company sounded better than breakfast alone." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Fresh bread, honey, fruits that had no business existing in winter, meat that melted on her tongue. Kael had forgotten what plenty felt like. 8 winters of near starvation had made her body forget how to process abundance. "Tell me about the old songs," Fenris finally said, setting down his cup. "The ones you sang to Rowan. Where did you learn them?" Kael's hand stilled on her bread. "I don't know. They've always been there in the back of my mind, like memories of a life I never lived. Can you sing one now?" She hesitated, then realized he was asking, not commanding. The difference mattered. "I'll try." The melody came from somewhere deeper than thought, emerging in a language that tasted of starlight and stone. The words meant nothing to her conscious mind, but her voice shaped them with perfect certainty, carrying notes that made the firelight dance and the windows hum in resonance. When she finished, Fenris was staring at her with an expression that married wonder and devastation. "That's a morning song," he said hoarsely, "from before the splintering, before the pack split and the old magic died. My grandmother used to sing it. How do you know it?" "I don't know," Kael admitted. "Sometimes the songs just come, especially when I'm alone in the woods or when the moon is full." "The prophecy," Fenris breathed. It spoke of a voice that would remember what we'd forgotten, a bridge between the broken pieces. I thought it was metaphor, poetry. But you're literally carrying our lost history in your throat." "That's ridiculous," Kael said, but the protest felt hollow. Because deep down, she'd always known she was different. The exile hadn't just been about defending herself from the man who'd tried to force her. It had been about the way animals followed her, the way she could sense storms days before they arrived, the way old languages spilled from her lips in dreams. "Is it?" Fenris leaned forward, intensity radiating from him like heat. "You survive alone in the harshest climate on this continent for 8 winters. You find my son when trained warriors could not. You know songs lost 3 centuries ago. You bear the mark of the bond despite being human. Tell me, Kael, what part of that is ridiculous?" She wanted to argue, wanted to deny, but the thread between them vibrated with truth that made lies impossible. "If I'm this prophesied bridge, what does that mean? What do you expect from me?" "I expect you to be yourself," Fenris said simply. "The prophecy is just words. You're real, you're here, and whether you're fated or accidental doesn't change what I'm asking. Stay. Help me heal what's been broken, not as queen or prophet, but as the woman who couldn't let my son die." "And the bond?" she asked quietly. "What about that?" "The bond is ours to navigate," he said. "It's powerful, yes. It pushes us together with a force I can't fully describe, but we're not slaves to it. We can choose what it means, what shape it takes between us." Before Kael could respond, a sharp knock interrupted. Thora entered without waiting for permission, her expression grim. "Sire, the council requests immediate audience. There's been an incident." Fenris's jaw tightened. "What kind of incident?" "The Southern Pacts sent a delegation. They're demanding to meet the human who supposedly bears the High King's bond. They're calling it impossible, calling her a fraud." Fenris's growl rattled the windows. "They dare..." Let them, Kael interrupted, surprising herself. Both Fenris and Thora turned to stare. If I'm going to be here, I can't hide. Let them judge me. Let them question. If the bond is real, it'll prove itself. You don't understand what you're offering, Fenris said tightly. The council can be brutal. They'll tear into every part of you, looking for weakness. Then they'll find plenty, Kael said, standing. I'm human, weak, poor, without title or training, but I'm not a fraud, and I'm not afraid of their questions. Something fierce and proud flashed across Fenris's face. Then we face them together. The trial of truth. The council chamber was carved from black stone that seemed to swallow light, and it was filled with predators wearing human skin. 20 wolves sat in a semicircle, their eyes reflecting firelight in colors that nature never intended. Amber, silver, blood red, poison green. The oldest among them looked carved from winter itself, white-haired and glacier-eyed, radiating power that made Kael's human body want to prostrate itself in submission. She refused to yield. Fenris entered beside her, and the room's energy shifted immediately. These were his people, his pack, but the tension hummed like a plucked wire. They stood as one when he entered, fists over hearts, but their gazes slid to Kael with unconcealed suspicion. "Counselors," Fenris said, his voice carrying the weight of 3,000 years of silver heritage. "I present Kael of the Northern Wastes, who saved my son from certain death." "She is the one you claim bears your bond," interrupted the ancient-looking wolf. His voice sounded like glaciers carving. "High King, we must speak plainly. The bond hasn't chosen in 5 years. Since Lady Mora's death, you've been without mate. And now you bring us a human from exile and claim the sacred bond has awakened. You'll understand our skepticism." "I understand your loyalty, Elder Frost," Fenris replied, steel beneath courtesy. "But the bond doesn't require your belief to exist. It simply is." A younger wolf, beautiful in the dangerous way of predators, her hair like spilled ink, leaned forward. "Then prove it, High King. We've all heard of the bond's signs. Show us." Kael felt Fenris tense beside her, but she spoke before he could. "What proof would satisfy you?" The beautiful wolf's smile was all teeth. "The bonded share more than proximity. They share thoughts, feelings, pain. Strike him." She gestured to Fenris. "If he feels it through the bond, we'll begin to believe." "I'm not striking him," Kael said flatly. "Then you're a fraud," another counselor sneered. "Using our king's grief and desperation to gain position." The bond sang. That's the only way Kael could describe it. A sudden harmonic resonance that started in her chest and spread through every nerve. She felt Fenris's presence bloom in her mind, not invasive, but immense, ancient and powerful and profoundly lonely. His frustration with the council, his fierce protectiveness of her, his bone-deep exhaustion from years of ruling without an equal, and beneath it all, a love so new it hadn't named itself yet, but already strong enough to reshape his entire world. She gasped, and Fenris caught her as her knees buckled. Through the bond, she felt his alarm, his apology for not warning her, his desperate hope that she wouldn't reject what she'd just experienced. "Stop!" she whispered, though whether to him or herself she couldn't tell. "I can't," Fenris replied, and the words came through the bond as much as his lips. "It's not voluntary, not controllable. The bond decides when to share, when to merge. We're passengers as much as participants." "Enough," Elder Frost said, and power rolled through the word. The bond immediately dampened, becoming bearable again. The old wolf studied them with eyes that had witnessed empires rise and fall. "You weren't faking that. No human could mimic the bond collapse with such accuracy." His gaze sharpened on Kael. "But that doesn't answer our deeper questions. Who are you, child? Where do you come from? And why does the bond choose a human when it's refused every wolf offered to our king these past 5 years?" Kael straightened, pulling herself from Fenris's supportive grip to stand on her own. "I'm nobody. The daughter of a seamstress who died in childbirth. Raised by an aunt who hated me for surviving when her sister didn't. Exiled at 17 for defending myself against rape. I've lived alone in the frozen wastes for 8 winters, surviving on what I could hunt and forage. I have no education beyond what the forest taught me. No magic beyond the songs that sometimes come through me without permission. No worth by any measure your society would recognize. The chamber was silent. And yet, she continued, voice steady despite the scrutiny of 20 apex predators, I found Prince Rowan when your warriors could not. I gave him my warmth when I had little to spare. I sang him songs that shouldn't exist in human memory, and I bore your king's bond despite every rational reason it shouldn't choose me. So either your sacred prophecy is wrong, or worth isn't measured the way you think it is. The beautiful dark-haired wolf laughed, a genuine sound that rang through the chamber like bells. I like her. She has fangs. She has audacity, another councillor grumbled, which isn't the same as sing, Elder Frost interrupted, his ancient eyes locked on Kael. You mentioned songs that shouldn't exist. Sing one now. Kael glanced at Fenris, who nodded encouragingly through the bond. She closed her eyes, reaching for the melody that had been pressing against her lips since entering this power-soaked chamber. The song that emerged was different from the morning tune she'd sung at breakfast. This one was fiercer, older, carrying harmonics that made the black stone walls resonate. The language tasted of copper and moonlight, and the words shaped themselves. By fang and claw we rose, by blood and bond we fell. The splintered packs shall walk alone, until the bridge voice breaks the spell. She comes in winter's darkest hour, with empty hands and scarred soul, neither wolf nor wholly human, but the one who makes us whole. The final note hung in the air, and Kael opened her eyes to find every councillor staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to religious awe. Elder Frost had gone pale beneath his weathered skin. That's the song of reunification, he breathed. Lost during the splintering 3 centuries ago. Only 3 elders alive heard it before it vanished, and all swore they could never remember the words. His voice cracked. How do you know it? I don't, Kael admitted. I've never heard it before. It just came. The prophecy, whispered the beautiful wolf. She truly is the bridge. Or she's a very skilled con artist who learned our history, a skeptical councillor countered, but his words lacked conviction. Fenris stepped forward, power radiating from him in waves that made Kael's human hindbrain scream danger. Enough. The bond has chosen. The songs have returned. Whether Kael is prophet or coincidence doesn't matter. She's mine, my mate, my equal, and anyone who challenges that will answer to me personally. The threat hung heavy in the air. These were his councillors, his advisors, but they were also wolves, and wolves understood dominance. Elder Frost bowed his head first, and one by one the others followed. Forgive us, High King, the old wolf said formally. We didn't doubt you. We feared for you. 5 years is a long grief, and desperate hearts can see what they wish to see. I understand, Fenris said, some of the steel leaving his voice. But she's real. This is real. And I need you to accept her as you would any true-born mate. We will try, Elder Frost said carefully. But you must understand the court won't be as easily convinced. There are those who wanted you to choose from among the packs. Alliances that were promised, hopes that were fostered. Your bond with a human, prophecy or not, will create complications. Through the bond, Kael felt Fenris's sudden weariness. This was just the beginning. The first battle in what would be a long war of acceptance. Then let them complicate, Kael said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. I didn't ask for this, didn't seek it, but I'm not running from it either. If the bond chose me, then there's a reason, and I'll be damned if I let politics and prejudice define what that reason is. The beautiful dark-haired wolf laughed again. Definitely fangs. I'm Lyra, by the way, Southern Pack representative. And I think you and I are going to be excellent friends, human. As the council dissolved, wolves approaching to introduce themselves with varying degrees of warmth. Kael felt the weight of what she'd just committed to settling on her shoulders. She'd faced down the council, proven the bond's existence, but this was just the beginning. Through their connection, Fenris sent a pulse of pride and gratitude so strong it made her throat tight. "Together," he murmured through the bond. "Whatever comes, we face it together." And despite everything, the impossibility, the danger, the complete upheaval of her entire existence, Kael found herself believing him. Shadows of the court. The formal dinner was psychological warfare, dressed in silk and silverware. Kael had been prepared for spectacle. Rowan's warning had ensured that. But nothing could have truly readied her for the sheer, predatory elegance of court wolves in their element. The great hall soared 3 stories high, its walls carved with running wolves that seemed to move in the firelight. Long tables stretched in precise formation, seating over 200 wolves whose combined power made the air thick enough to choke on. Everyone wore their finest, furs dyed in impossible colors, jewelry that caught light like trapped stars, leather worked soft as silk. Kael wore a simple dress Lyra had sent to her rooms, deep forest green, well-made but unadorned. She'd refused anything more elaborate, knowing instinctively that trying to compete with these predators on their aesthetic terms would only make her look weaker. Fenris sat at the head table, Rowan on his left, the empty chair on his right, waiting like a dare. Every eye in the hall tracked Kael as she crossed the floor, whispers rising like disturbed wasps. She felt their judgment, their curiosity, their barely concealed hostility. She raised her chin and didn't falter. "You look beautiful," Fenris said as she settled beside him, and through the bond she felt his absolute sincerity. He didn't care that her dress was simple or her hair unpinned. He saw only her. "Liar," she murmured back, but smiled slightly. "I never lied to you," he replied, and the weight of that promise settled between them. Rowan beamed at her from Fenris's other side. "You came. Papa said you might not, that the court was scary for humans." "Your papa underestimates me," Kael said, loud enough that several nearby wolves definitely heard. Fenris's lip twitched in suppressed amusement. The meal began with ritualistic precision, wine poured, bread broken, meat served. Kael navigated the Byzantine table manners through a combination of watching Fenris and trusting her instincts. When she inevitably made small mistakes, she didn't apologize or draw attention to them. She simply continued, refusing to let embarrassment show. "So," a voice purred from across the table, "you're the human who's ensnared our High King." Kael looked up to find a wolf of devastating beauty studying her, pale hair like moonlight, eyes the color of glacial ice, bone structure that could cut glass. Everything about her screamed aristocracy and power. "I haven't ensnared anyone," Kael replied evenly. "The bond chose. Neither of us had much say in it." "How convenient," the woman said, smiles sharp as knives. "The bond chooses just as you happen to save the crown prince. Remarkable timing." "Seraphine," Fenris said, warning in his tone. "Kael is my bonded mate. You will treat her with respect." "Of course, High King," Seraphine said smoothly. "I meant no disrespect, merely curiosity. After all, many of us had hoped—" She trailed off delicately, but her meaning was clear. Through the bond, Kael felt Fenris's guilt and frustration. This woman had been among those who'd pursued him after Mora's death. He'd rejected her gently, but clearly the wound remained raw. "Hope is a dangerous thing," Kael said, meeting Seraphine's ice-blue gaze steadily. "It makes us believe we can control what was never ours to command." Several nearby wolves inhaled sharply. Seraphine's perfect facade cracked slightly, rage flickering behind her eyes before she controlled it. "Wise words from someone so young," Seraphine said. "Tell me, have you spent much time studying court philosophy, or is survival instinct all you possess?" "Survival instinct has kept me alive for 8 winters in the coldest region of this continent," Kael replied. "How long would you last in my cabin, I wonder?" Lyra, seated further down the table, actually applauded. "Excellent. I love a meal with entertainment." The tension broke slightly, several wolves laughing or looking impressed. Seraphine's smile turned glacial, but she said nothing more, returning her attention to her meal with rigid precision. Fenris's hand found Kael's beneath the table, squeezing gently. Through the bond, gratitude and pride flowed so strongly she almost gasped. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of conversations and subtle political maneuvering. Kael spoke little, content to observe and learn. She noticed alliances in who sat beside whom, power dynamics in who spoke first, ancient grudges in averted gazes and tight smiles. These wolves had lived for centuries, many of them. Their conflicts and relationships stretched back through time in ways her human mind struggled to comprehend. She was an infant stumbling into a dance that had been choreographed over millennia. After the main courses cleared, the entertainment began. Musicians with instruments carved from bone and wood, their music carrying harmonics that made Kael's bones vibrate. Then the storytellers came, their tales of ancient battles and legendary loves told in the old language that tasted familiar on Kael's tongue, even as her mind failed to translate. "Do you understand them?" Fenris murmured against her ear. "Some," Kael admitted. "Not the words exactly, but the meaning bleeds through somehow." "The songs," Fenris said thoughtfully. "They're opening channels in your mind, ways to access what was locked away." Before Kael could respond, one of the storytellers gestured to her. "The High King's new mate. Will you honor us with a song? Let us hear what the prophecy sounds like in human voice." Every eye turned to her. The request was test and trap combined. Refuse, and she'd seem weak, unwilling to participate in their culture. Agree, and she risked embarrassing herself before the entire court. Kael stood before she could second-guess the impulse. She walked to the center of the hall, acutely aware of her simple dress among all the finery, her human frailty among these immortal predators. But she'd never been beautiful or powerful or perfect. All she had was her voice and the strange songs that lived in her throat. So she sang. The melody that emerged was neither morning tune nor prophecy song. This was something wilder, a call to hunt, to run, to remember what it meant to be wolf and free and part of something larger than individual self. The words were pure old language, flowing from her without conscious thought, and as she sang, something remarkable happened. The wolves began to change. Not fully, they retained their human forms, but their eyes bled to wolf gold, their teeth lengthened, and a collective howl rose to join her voice. The harmony was devastating, beautiful, a sound that hadn't existed in 3 centuries. When the song ended, silence reigned for 3 heartbeats. Then Rowan began to clap, his small hands making sharp sounds in the stunned quiet. One by one, others joined, until the entire hall thundered with applause. Kael returned to her seat on shaking legs. Fenris pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers in a gesture she was learning meant profound intimacy among wolves. "You're incredible," he breathed. "Do you understand what you just did? That was the hunt call, lost for 300 years, and you brought it back." "I didn't bring anything back," Kael protested. "It was just there, wanting to be sung." "That's what makes you the bridge," Fenris said. "You don't force or command. You simply allow. Let what was lost find its way back through you." Later, as the dinner dissolved into smaller conversations and groups, Elder Frost approached their table. His ancient eyes were damp, and when he spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. "I heard my grandmother sing that song when I was a pup," he said. 500 years ago, before the splintering tore us apart. I thought I'd never hear it again. You've given me a gift beyond price, child." "I didn't do anything," Kael said, uncomfortable with his raw gratitude. "You did everything," the old wolf countered. "You opened a door we thought was sealed forever. The question now is, how many other doors can you open?" As Kael lay in her bed that night, too overwhelmed to sleep, she felt Fenris through the bond. He was in his own chambers, Rowan sleeping beside him, but his consciousness brushed against hers with gentle inquiry. "Are you all right?" The question came through the bond, without words, just pure meaning. "I don't know," she sent back. "This is all so much, so fast." "I know, I'm sorry, don't be sorry, just help me understand. What do they expect from me? What am I supposed to do with these songs?" Fenris's presence in her mind grew stronger, more tangible. "You're not supposed to do anything, just be yourself. The rest will unfold as it's meant to. And if I fail? If I'm not this prophesied bridge, then you fail," Fenris replied simply, "and I'll love you anyway." The word love hung between them in the bond space, shocking in its appearance. Neither had spoken it aloud, but there it was, honest and terrifying and utterly undeniable. "It's too soon for that," Kael sent, panicking slightly. "I know," Fenris agreed, "doesn't make it less true. The bond knows before our conscious minds accept it. But I won't pressure you. Take all the time you need." Kael pulled back from the bond, needing space to process. But even with distance, she felt Fenris like a warm presence at her back, steady and patient, and utterly reliable. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of running through moonlit forests on 4 legs, of hunting in a pack, of belonging so deep it felt like coming home. The shadow wolves' return. 3 days of relative peace followed the dinner. Kael spent her mornings with Rowan, who'd attached himself to her with single-minded determination. The child was brilliant and occasionally exhausting, asking endless questions about everything from why snow melted to whether birds dreamed. Afternoons belonged to Lyra, who'd appointed herself Kael's guide to court survival. The beautiful southern wolf was unexpectedly funny, pointing out political landmines with casual expertise while sharing scandalous gossip that made Kael laugh despite herself. Evenings were Fenris's domain. They'd take dinner together, sometimes with Rowan, sometimes alone. The bond between them deepened incrementally, not the explosive, overwhelming surges of those first days, but gentle intimacy. Learning how he took his tea, strong, bitter with honey, discovering he carved wooden figurines during sleepless nights, understanding that his gruff exterior hid a man capable of devastating tenderness. But on the 4th morning, everything changed. Kael woke to alarm bells, deep, resonant bronze tones that vibrated through the castle's bones. She threw on clothes and rushed into the corridor to find chaos. Warriors ran past in organized panic, weapons drawn, faces grim. Thora grabbed her arm. "Stay in your rooms. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but the High King." "What's happening?" "Shadow wolves," Thora said grimly. "They've breached the northern perimeter." Then she was gone, and Kael stood alone in the corridor as the castle mobilized for war. She should have obeyed, should have locked herself away as instructed, but the bond sang with Fenris's terror, his rage, his desperate need to protect. And beneath it all, a single thought so loud it deafened everything else. Rowan. Kael ran. She found the prince's chambers empty, his bed unmade, toys scattered across the floor. Panic clawed at her throat as she reached through the bond for Fenris. "Where is Rowan?" The response came fragmentary, distracted. "Training yard. Thora has him." "Kael, please stay inside where it's—" The bond cut off, severed not by choice but by necessity. Fenris had gone into battle, and the concentration required left no room for connection. Kael sprinted toward the training yards, her human lungs burning. Wolves streamed past her, going the opposite direction, towards the northern walls where the fighting had erupted. No one stopped her. They were too focused on the threat. She burst into the training yard to find it deserted. No Rowan, no Thora, just empty space and scattered training weapons. Then she heard it. A child's scream cut off abruptly. Kael's blood turned to ice. She followed the sound, her human instincts screaming danger even as her feet carried her forward. Through an archway, down stone steps slick with frost, into the lower levels where the castle met the mountain itself. The corridor ended in a large chamber carved from living rock, and there, bound by shadows that moved with unnatural sentience, was Rowan. 3 creatures surrounded him, and calling them wolves was like calling a hurricane a breeze. They were darkness given form, smoke and malice shaped into lupine nightmares. Their eyes burned red as dying stars, and their presence made the air taste of rot and despair. "The prince," one hissed, its voice like grinding stone. "Perfect bait for the king, and look, a bonus, the human mate." Kael's hand found a training sword abandoned by the archway. The blade was dull, meant for practice, useless against these things, but she raised it anyway. "Let him go." The shadow wolves laughed, a sound that made her bones ache. "Brave. Stupid, but brave. Tell us, little human. Do you know what we are? We're what happens when wolves reject the light, when they choose power over pack, hunger over honor. We were your mate's greatest failure, his sister, his warriors, his friends, all corrupted by the darkness he couldn't stop." The words hit like physical blows. Through the bond, even severed, Kael felt the echo of Fenris's ancient guilt. These creatures had been his people once, his pack, and something had twisted them into these nightmares. "I don't care what you were," Kael said, stepping forward. "I care that you're threatening a child." "Then come save him," the largest shadow wolf purred. "Show us what the prophesied bridge can do. Show us the power that convinced the High King to bond with prey." Kael charged, and the shadow wolf's laughter followed her like poison. The training sword passed through its form like smoke, meeting no resistance. The creature's clawed shadow paw lashed out, catching her across the ribs. Pain exploded, white-hot and devastating. She hit the stone floor hard, blood warm against her side. The shadow wolves circled, playing with her like cats with wounded prey. "Pathetic," one sneered. "This is what the bond chose, this fragile, powerless—" Kael sang. She didn't think about it, didn't plan it. The melody simply erupted from her throat, raw and primal and absolutely furious. But this wasn't one of the old songs. This was something new, born from her rage and terror and desperate love for the small boy bound in darkness. The words shaped themselves, by light reclaimed from shadow's hold, by bonds that refused to break. I call the dawn. Through midnight's cold, I sing what darkness cannot take. Light exploded from her voice, actual, physical light that blazed silver-white and drove the shadows back like living things. The shadow wolves shrieked, their forms wavering as the illumination touched them. The darkness binding Rowan dissolved, and the boy ran to her, throwing his small arms around her even as she continued singing. The power flowing through her was agony and ecstasy combined. She felt something fundamental shifting inside her, doors opening in her soul that had always been locked. The songs weren't just memory, they were magic, raw and ancient and devastating. One shadow wolf lunged, and Kael's voice shaped a word that meant burn. The creature erupted in silver flame, its death shriek echoing through the chamber as it dissolved into nothing. The remaining 2 shadow wolves snarled, but there was fear in their burning eyes now. "Impossible! Humans can't channel the old magic. It requires—" "I'm done with your explanations," Kael said, and her voice resonated with harmonics that made the stone walls crack. "Leave, now, or burn like your friend." They fled, melting into shadows that raced up the walls and disappeared into cracks too small for anything material. Kael's legs gave out, the power draining from her like water through a sieve. Rowan caught her awkwardly, his small body trying to support her weight. "You saved me," he whispered. "You made light. You made the bad wolves run away." "Are you hurt?" Kael managed, checking him over with shaking hands. "No, scared. But you came. I knew you would. Papa said the bond would make you feel when I was in danger." Footsteps thundered down the corridor, and then Fenris was there, Thora and a dozen warriors behind him. His eyes found Rowan first, assessing, checking for injury, then moved to Kael. The relief and terror and love that crashed through the re-established bond nearly knocked her unconscious. He dropped beside her, hands hovering over the claw marks in her side. "You're bleeding. What did you do?" I felt power surge through the bond, something I've never experienced before. "She made light," Rowan said proudly, "and burned the shadow wolves with singing. It was amazing, Papa. She was amazing." Fenris's eyes widened as he took in the scorch marks on the stone, the lingering traces of silver light still fading from the air. "Kael, the old magic. You channeled it. But that's impossible for humans. It requires—" "Don't," Kael interrupted, exhaustion pulling at her. "Don't explain it, don't analyze it, just Rowan's safe. That's all that matters." "You channeled the old magic to save my son," Fenris said, wonder and devastation mixing in his voice. "Do you understand what that means? What you've done?" "I protected what's mine," Kael said simply, then passed out. The bridge awakens consciousness, returned in fragments, warmth, soft fabric, pain that had dulled from sharp to aching. Kael opened her eyes to find herself in her chambers, pale morning light streaming through the windows. How long had she been unconscious? 3 days, Fenris said from beside her bed, answering the unspoken question through the bond. He looked exhausted, silver stubble covering his jaw, dark circles under those blue eyes. "You've been sleeping for 3 days. The healers said your body was adjusting to the magic you channeled. It nearly killed you." "But it didn't," Kael said, her voice rough from disuse. "Rowan is fine, completely unharmed, thanks to you. He's been in here every day, sitting with you, telling you stories even though you couldn't hear them." Fenris's hand found hers, warm and solid. "Kael, you saved my son again. But more than that, you proved something we'd only hoped was true. You can channel the old magic, the light that drives back shadow. You really are the bridge." Kael tried to sit up and Fenris immediately helped, propping pillows behind her. "I don't understand any of this. How can I channel magic? I'm human." "We don't know," Fenris admitted. "Elder Frost has theories that you carry ancient bloodlines, that you're a throwback to before humans and wolves split, that the songs themselves transformed you. But theories don't change the truth. You wielded power that should be impossible for you." "The shadow wolves," Kael said, memories flooding back. "They said terrible things about your sister, about corruption." Fenris's expression darkened. 5 years ago, a sickness spread through the northern packs, a magical plague that fed on negative emotions, rage, jealousy, despair. It corrupted wolves from the inside out, turning them into those shadow creatures. My sister was among the first infected. My mate, Mora, led the mission to find a cure. His voice cracked. "She never came back, and the shadow wolves have hunted us ever since, trying to spread their corruption." "I'm so sorry," Kael whispered, squeezing his hand. "Mora would have liked you," Fenris said softly. "She was fierce like you, protective, willing to sacrifice everything for those she loved." He met her eyes. "The healers told me something else while you slept. The magic you channeled, it wasn't just defensive, it was purifying. You didn't just drive the shadow wolves away. You hurt them in a way we haven't been able to in 5 years. You wielded light against their darkness." "So what does that mean?" "It means," Elder Frost said from the doorway, "that you might be able to cure them, reverse the corruption, bring our lost wolves home." Kael stared at the ancient wolf. "That's impossible. I don't know how I did what I did. I can't control it." "Then we teach you," Elder Frost said, entering the room with Lyra and Thora behind him. "We train you, help you understand the power flowing through you. And if I fail, if I can't do it again, then we're no worse off than we were before," Lyra said practically. "But if you can do it, if you can really cure the shadow wolves, you'll save thousands of lives, maybe more." Kael looked at Fenris, seeking guidance. Through the bond, she felt his conflict, his desire to keep her safe, warring with his hope that she might end the nightmare that had plagued his people for 5 years. "It's your choice," he said aloud. "I won't ask you to risk yourself. You've done enough." "No," Kael said slowly. "I haven't. If I have this power, this ability, and I don't use it, what kind of person does that make me?" She took a deep breath. "Teach me. Train me. I'll do whatever it takes." The training was brutal. Elder Frost pushed her past exhaustion daily, teaching her to consciously access the power that had come instinctively when Rowan was threatened. The songs were the key, each one a different channel, a different frequency of magic. She learned the healing hymn, the binding ballad, the purification psalm, but the most important was the redemption song, the one that could theoretically cure shadow corruption. It was also the most dangerous, requiring her to channel enough light to burn away darkness without destroying the wolf underneath. "You're attempting surgery with a sword," Elder Frost said one afternoon after she'd collapsed from her 20th attempt. "Too much power, and you incinerate them. Too little, and the corruption remains. You need perfect control." "Then I'll get perfect control," Kael said through gritted teeth, forcing herself upright. Fenris watched these sessions with barely concealed terror, the bond vibrating with his fear every time she pushed herself. But he never asked her to stop. He understood what she was trying to do and why. 6 weeks after the Shadow Wolf attack, Kael stood before the council again, but this time she wasn't defending her place. She was proposing a mission. "We've captured a Shadow Wolf," she said, her voice steady. "One of the younger corruptions. I want to try curing him." The council erupted in arguments. Too dangerous, too risky. What if she failed and the Shadow Wolf escaped? "Then we'll kill it," Kael said bluntly. "But we have to try. These were your people, your pack. Don't they deserve a chance at redemption?" Elder Frost's vote broke the deadlock. The attempt would be made under controlled conditions, with warriors ready to eliminate the Shadow Wolf if anything went wrong. The corrupted wolf was brought in chains of blessed silver to a chamber warded with every protection the pack could devise. It snarled and hissed, red eyes burning with hatred, but beneath the corruption, Kael saw what it had been. Young, barely into adulthood, frightened. "What's your name?" she asked softly. The creature laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Name? I'm Shadow. Darkness. I'm the nightmare that hunts—" "What was your name?" Kael insisted. "Before the corruption took you." Something flickered behind those burning eyes. "Ash. My name was Ash." "Ash!" Kael repeated, stepping closer despite Fenris's warning growl through the bond. "I'm going to try to help you. It's going to hurt, but on the other side you'll be free." "I don't want freedom," the Shadow Wolf hissed. "I want—" Kael began to sing. The redemption song was agony given voice. It required her to pour everything into it. All her pain, all her love, all her desperate hope that the darkness could be driven back. Silver light erupted from her throat, wrapping around the Shadow Wolf like chains. Ash screamed. The sound was inhuman, devastating. His shadow form writhed, trying to escape the light, but Kael held firm, singing through the tears streaming down her face. She felt the corruption fighting back, dark tendrils trying to reach her, infect her. The bond flared as Fenris fed her strength, his power flowing into her like a river. And suddenly, she understood. She wasn't supposed to do this alone. The bridge wasn't one person. It was the connection between them, the joining of human and wolf, light and wild. Together, they sang. Fenris's voice joined hers, deep and resonant, providing the foundation for her melody, and then others joined. Lyra, Thora, Elder Frost, every wolf in the chamber lending their voices to the harmony. The power multiplied, becoming something vast and terrible and beautiful. The shadow burned away like morning mist, and Ash collapsed, his form shifting back to wolf, then human. A young man, no more than 20, sobbing on the stone floor, alive, uncorrupted, free. The chamber erupted in shocked joy. They'd done it, proven it possible. Kael collapsed and Fenris caught her, holding her close as the bond hummed with shared triumph and exhaustion. "You did it," He breathed against her hair. You actually did it. We did it, Kael corrected. All of us together. That's what the bridge means, isn't it? Not me alone, but the connection between all of us. Elder Frost approached, his ancient eyes damp. The prophecy is fulfilled. The bridge has awakened. The path to reunification has opened. The gathering storm word spread like wildfire. Within days, delegations arrived from every corner of the wolf territories. Southern packs, eastern tribes, western clans. They came to see the human who'd cured shadow corruption, to witness the impossible made real. Not all came in peace. You've created hope, Seraphine said one evening, cornering Kael in a quiet corridor. The beautiful wolf's expression was complicated, part admiration, part resentment. And hope is dangerous. It makes people believe change is possible. Change is possible, Kael replied carefully. We proved that. Did you? Seraphine stepped closer, her wolf eyes gleaming in the torchlight. Or did you provide false promise? You cured one wolf, yes, but there are thousands corrupted. Can you cure them all before you burn yourself out, before the magic kills you? I don't know, Kael admitted, but I have to try. Why? The question was genuine, not rhetorical. You didn't ask for this. You could leave, go back to your cabin, live out your days in peace. Why shoulder this burden? Kael thought about the question, really thought about it, because I've been alone for so long, 8 winters in that cabin, surviving but not living, and now I have family, a mate, a son, a pack. How can I have all that and not fight for it? Seraphine stared at her for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. I wanted to hate you, wanted to find you weak or false or unworthy, but you're none of those things. You're just honest. Impossibly, dangerously honest. She turned to leave, then paused. The Western clans don't accept the prophecy. They're planning something. Be careful. Before Kael could ask more, Seraphine vanished into shadow. The warning proved prescient. 3 nights later, assassins struck. Kael woke to Fenris's roar of rage through the bond, jolting upright as her door crashed open. But it wasn't Fenris standing there. It was 3 wolves she'd never seen, their eyes cold with purpose. The Western clans send their regards, one said, and lunged. Kael rolled, the blade meant for her heart catching her shoulder instead. Pain exploded hot and bright. She tried to scream, to sing, but one attacker clamped a hand over her mouth, cutting off her voice. Fenris! She screamed through the bond, pouring every ounce of terror and pain through the connection. His response was immediate, rage and protective fury so strong it made the assassins hesitate. Then the door exploded inward, and Fenris was there, more wolf than man, silver fur bristling with power. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a massacre. Fenris tore through the assassins with primal fury, his teeth finding throats, his claws painting the walls red. It was over in seconds, and then he was shifting back, pulling Kael into his arms with hands that shook. You're hurt. Gods, you're bleeding. I'm okay, Kael managed through tears. Fenris, I'm okay. You stopped them. If I'd been seconds slower. His voice cracked, and through the bond, Kael felt the depth of his terror. She was his mate, yes, but more than that. She was his hope. The possibility of a future without the shadow corruption. Losing her would mean losing everything twice. But you weren't, Kael said firmly, cupping his blood-spattered face. I'm here. I'm alive. And we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. The assassination attempt had consequences. Fenris declared martial law, increasing security to suffocating levels. The Western clans denied involvement, but their delegation left hastily the next morning. They're afraid, Lyra explained, as she helped Kael change the bandage on her shoulder. You represent change they can't control, power they don't understand, so they tried to eliminate the threat. By killing me. By killing you, Lyra confirmed. But they failed. And now you need to decide. Do you hide and hope they don't try again? Or do you show them exactly why you're unkillable? Kael chose the latter. 1 week after the assassination attempt, she stood before the gathered representatives of every wolf territory and performed a miracle. 20 shadow wolves, captured at great cost, were brought before her in blessed chains. The crowd murmured in fear and disgust. These creatures had killed their friends, corrupted their families, hunted them for 5 long years. "I'm going to free them," Kael announced. "All 20. Today. And I'm going to show you that redemption is possible for anyone willing to accept it." The redemption song that day lasted 3 hours. Every pack lent their voices, creating a harmony so powerful that it shook the castle's foundations. Kael sang until her throat bled, until her vision swam, until Fenris was practically holding her upright through the bond. But one by one, the shadow wolves transformed. Darkness burned away, leaving behind confused, traumatized wolves who remembered what they'd done, but were no longer compelled to do it. When the last wolf collapsed, freed, Kael finally let unconsciousness take her. She woke days later to find the entire wolf world had changed. The cure worked, it was replicable, and suddenly the impossible had become inevitable. They could actually win this war. Fenris proposed immediately. Well, not immediately. First, he waited for her to wake up. Then for the healers to confirm she'd recover fully. Then for her to eat something and regain some strength. Then he knelt beside her bed, this high king who commanded thousands, and said, "I know the bond already ties us, but I want to choose you, formally, completely. Will you be my wife, not just mate but equal? Not just prophesied bridge but Kael, the woman who saved my son, sang light into darkness, and taught me to hope again." Through the bond, Kael felt his absolute sincerity. He would accept no for an answer, would never pressure her, but his hope was a living thing, bright and beautiful and terrifying. "Yes," she said, tears streaming, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was 3 months later, enough time for every pack to gather, for alliances to solidify, for the cured shadow wolves to reintegrate into society. Kael wore white fur and silver, her hair finally grown long enough to braid with moonflowers. She looked nothing like the half-starved exile who'd saved a cub in a blizzard, and everything like the queen she'd become. Fenris stood at the altar in his formal regalia, but his eyes held only her. When they sang their vows, yes, sang them in the old tradition, the harmony they created was its own kind of magic. "I choose you," Fenris sang, "through winter and war, through shadow and light, through every lifetime we're given." "I choose you," Kael echoed. "Through fear and faith, through pain and healing, through every song yet unsung." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, every wolf in attendance howled their approval, and the mountains themselves seemed to sing back. The last shadow. But peace, Kael learned, was a fragile thing. 6 months into her marriage, as she helped cure more shadow wolves and worked to unite the fractured packs, a message arrived that changed everything. The source has awakened. The corruption's heart. Come to the obsidian wastes if you want to end this forever. Come alone or watch your precious cure fail. All those you've freed will fall back into shadow. Kael showed the message to Fenris, and through the bond felt his immediate refusal. "It's a trap. Obviously a trap. You're not going. If I don't, and they're telling the truth about re-corrupting everyone I've cured, then we'll cure them again," Fenris said firmly. "But I'm not letting you walk into an ambush. It says alone. I don't care what it says." Fenris's jaw set with stubborn determination. "Where you go, I go. That's what mates means." In the end, they compromised. Kael would go, but with an army at her back, far enough to avoid triggering the alone clause, close enough to intervene if needed. Rowan, now 7, and already showing signs of powerful magic, begged to come. They refused, leaving him in Elder Frost's protective custody. The Obsidian Wastes lived up to their name, a volcanic region where nothing grew and the stone itself seemed to hunger for warmth. At the center, a massive crater descended into the earth, and from it, darkness pulsed like a heartbeat. The source, Fenris breathed. This is where the plague began, where my sister fell, where Mora... His voice broke. Through the bond, Kael felt his old wounds reopening. This place held ghosts. They descended into the crater, and at the bottom, waiting in a chamber carved from obsidian, stood a shadow wolf unlike any Kael had seen. It was massive, ancient, and horribly familiar. "Hello, little brother," it said in a voice like winter's dying breath. Fenris staggered. "Kira, no. You died 5 years ago. I buried you." "You buried a husk," the creature that had been Kira corrected. "The corruption took me so completely that I became its vessel, its will made flesh. And now I offer you a choice." "What choice?" Kael asked, stepping forward. The shadow Kira smiled. "Join me. Accept the shadow willingly. In return, I'll release every corrupted wolf. Let them go free. But someone must carry the darkness. The magic demands balance, light and shadow forever in tension. Your cure disrupts that balance, so choose, you or them." "That's not a choice," Fenris snarled. "I'll die before I let Kael." "Then they all fall back into shadow," Kira interrupted. "Every wolf she cured, plus everyone in a 100-mile radius. I'll spread corruption like wildfire, and her precious light won't be enough to stop it." Kael felt the truth in those words. This creature was powerful beyond measure. Fed by 5 years of accumulated darkness, it could make good on its threat. "There has to be another way," she said desperately. "There isn't," Kira replied. "Magic requires balance, always, so choose." Through the bond, Kael felt Fenris's anguish. He would choose her, would watch the world burn before sacrificing his mate. But that wasn't a choice. That was cowardice dressed as love. Kael began to sing. Not the redemption song. Not any song she'd been taught. This was new, emerging from somewhere deeper than training or tradition. It was the song of unity, the understanding that light and shadow weren't opposites but complements, two sides of the same power. "You're wrong," she sang, power building with each note. "Balance doesn't require carriers, it requires integration. Shadow isn't the enemy. Separation is. Rejection is. Fear is." Fenris caught on, his voice joining hers. And then others. The army waiting above heard their song and added their voices, 1,000 throats singing unity and wholeness, and the understanding that darkness had its place, alongside light. The power built, massive and terrifying and beautiful. Kael walked toward Shadow Kira, arms open, still singing. "I don't reject you. I don't fear you. I integrate you." She embraced the darkness. It rushed into her like a flood, 5 years of accumulated corruption trying to overwhelm her light, but Kael didn't fight it. She accepted it, let it flow through her while holding fast to who she was. Light and shadow danced in her veins, finding equilibrium, finding balance. Shadow Kira screamed, not in pain but in release. The corruption holding her dissolved, and suddenly it was just Kira, a woman, exhausted and traumatized but alive. She collapsed, and Fenris caught her, sobbing into his sister's hair. The chamber's darkness lifted, revealing obsidian walls that gleamed like stars. And Kael understood. The source hadn't been evil. It had been trapped, isolated, unable to integrate with the light. By accepting it, by refusing to reject shadow as inherently corrupt, she'd freed it. "The balance is restored," Elder Frost said from the chamber entrance, his ancient eyes wide with wonder. "Not by eliminating shadow, but by accepting it as part of the whole. You didn't just cure the corruption. You healed the fundamental wound." Kael swayed, and Fenris was there immediately, supporting her while still holding his sister. Through the bond, his love and gratitude and awe crashed over her like waves. "You did it," he whispered. "You actually did it. Ended the plague. Saved my sister. Saved us all." "We did it," Kael corrected, as she always did. "Together, that's what the bridge means." The journey back was slow. Kira needed support, and Kael was exhausted beyond measure. But as they emerged from the obsidian wastes into sunlight, they were greeted by a sight that made Kael's heart soar. Every pack had gathered, thousands of wolves from every territory, all howling their joy and gratitude. Shadow wolves who'd been cured, warriors who'd fought, families who'd lost loved ones and now had them back. And at the front, breaking free from Thora's protective grip, was Rowan. The young prince ran to them, launching himself into Kael's arms with enough force to knock her back a step. "You did it," he shouted. "I felt it through our bond. The darkness went away. You saved Aunt Kira." "We saved her," Kael corrected, ruffling his hair. "All of us together." That night, as Silverstone Keep celebrated with a feast that would be spoken of for generations, Kael stood on a balcony overlooking the mountains. Fenris joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his warmth chasing away the evening chill. "What are you thinking?" he asked through the bond. "That a year ago I was alone in a cabin, waiting to die," she answered. "And now I'm here, surrounded by family, by pack, by love. It doesn't feel real." "It's real," Fenris assured her. "You're real. This is real. And it's only the beginning, my love. The packs are reuniting. The old magic is returning. You've opened doors that have been closed for centuries. What if I can't live up to that? What if—" "Then you don't," Fenris interrupted gently, turning her to face him. "You've already done the impossible. Whatever comes next, we face together. But you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to save the world every day. You just have to be Kael. That's all you've ever needed to be." Behind them, they heard Rowan's laughter, Lyra's teasing voice, Elder Frost's deep rumble. Their family, their pack. Kael leaned into her mate's embrace and understood finally what home meant. Not a place, not a building, but this. Belonging so deep it felt like magic, love so strong it could heal ancient wounds, and the promise that whatever darkness lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone. The bond hummed between them, content and complete. And in the mountains beyond, wolves howled their joy to the stars, united at last.